Welcome to another edition of the M365 Podcast, where we bring together Microsoft experts, architects, developers, and community leaders to share real world experience, technical insights, and practical advice from across the Microsoft ecosystem. Today's guest is Parvis Gumra, an experienced Microsoft Power Platform, Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement, Azure architect who has been working with Dynamics CRM since version 4 back in 2010. Parvis is widely respected for combining traditional software engineering principles with modern low-code and no-code development practices. His particular expertise lies in application lifecycle management, or ALM, and implementing enterprise-grade CI CD pipelines for Power Platform and Dynamics 365 using Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. In this episode, we will discuss what separates successful Power Platform implementation from those that struggle, um, why ALM is often overlooked, how organizations can scale their low-code performance responsibly, and where Microsoft is taking the platform in the age of AI. Parvis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mega. Thank you so much for having me. Always lovely to be here. Been a long time follower of your shows and seen a few episodes. So lovely to be a guest on your show as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, can you tell a little bit about your journey into technology and how you first got involved in the Microsoft ecosystem, Dynamics, Power Platform, and so on?
Yeah, sure. So I had my heart set on a career in software engineering from a long time ago, from my childhood, effectively. But when I was young, when I was naive, all I really cared about was just cutting code. Right, I just wanted to write code all day long. So I went through, I deliberately structured and targeted my academic life, my studies,
Mm.
gearing towards that sort of career. So I learned a few programming languages through my studies. So the first one was Pascal.
Mm.
And then I went on to learn other languages like C and Java and, web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. Um, and then whilst I was studying, I did a what's in the UK is known as a sandwich placement, which is like in the third year of a university degree. Out of four, you take a year out and you go and work in industry. And that's when I first got hands-on experience with Microsoft .NET development. So it was primarily ASP.NET C Sharp at the time. So I was building web applications front end with SQL Server backend databases, and that's when I really got to understand the full kind of the full stack development kind of process, and I got to understand how to basically implement those for industry standards for business applications, right? And seeing the real value of how technology can help businesses. That was a real kind of eye opener for me. And I enjoyed the Microsoft's landscape quite a lot. And I decided that after I finished my studies, I wanted to kind of pursue a career in that direction. So I went back to university for the final year. I finished my degree off, and then I started to look for a job in .NET development. But I really struggled at the time because I only had 1 year experience, and even that was very junior. So it was very, very competitive. I tried, but I had no luck. So I then settled for totally different direction, doing SAS programming for a pharmaceuticals company, supporting
Okay.
their clinical trials process. I did that for a couple of years, and then I decided I'm going to give another try to finding out a role in .NET. And that's when I got back into .NET development 2 years after graduating. Again, it was ASP.NET development, and in that role, I really started to see, professional engineering standards. So things like source control and unit testing and automated builds and deployments, and all of those kinds of things for enterprise solutions. Um, and I really enjoyed that. I started to see, the real value of those kind of principles. And then I was progressing in my career, and I decided to look for a new role, and that role was sold to me as again as a .NET developer position, but it turned out to be Dynamics CRM version 4 development, and that's when I really got into the whole what's now known as the low code no code thing. In those days, it wasn't known as that. It was basically a quick way of spinning up business applications. In those days, it was on premise as well, and then gradually, CRM 2011 came out, CRM Online came out, and as over the years, I stayed with every version of the product. So doing dynamic CRM development, and gradually moving to more client-facing roles, and then moving gradually into design and architecture. And over the last 10 or 11 years, my focus has been primarily in engineering ALM processes for customers, large customers, enterprise customers, for the Power Platform. But prior to that, when I initially entered Dynamics CRM development, I found that ALM wasn't really being implemented at all, really, in CRM projects, and that was primarily due to the tooling not being available from Microsoft, and the platform not really lending itself very well to apply those sorts of principles. But as it evolved and the tooling got better, the platform got better, the solution framework came out, associated tooling came out like the solution packager, package deployer, and all of these things. Or then the community really started to push the boundaries as to what's possible in the ALN space for Dynamics and Power Platform. And I started to interact with people in the community to learn about all of these things,
Mm,
and how best to make use of that tooling and engineer processes of that nature.
mm.
So yeah, I got deeper and deeper into this, started learning more and more about this, and it's got to the point now where as I say, I've implemented ALM processes both using Azure DevOps and GitHub for a number of customers across the world.
Mm. Yeah, you have started as I said, traditional software developer. And now we have all low code, no code, vibe code. But is there something lessons you have taken from this time? You say, "Oh, this is was worse," or yeah, that's good. I have learned this. I can use it also in this low code, no code vibe area.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming from that traditional pro code background, understanding things like a backend and front end and connectivity between databases and applications and different servers, and understanding that entire stack really helped me kind of um, cement those fundamental principles, right? And those have kind of been the backbone of where I've taken my career. And even
Mm,
as the platform has evolved into this, over the last few years, the focus from Microsoft has been around the whole low code, no code kind of philosophy. But those principles fundamentally don't go away, right? They're still there, but they're just basically abstracted away from us as engineers. So things like databases and servers and connectivity between different APIs, all of those principles, authentication, those kind of stay with you, right? Despite it being abstracted away from us, as I say. So yeah, having the understanding of those concepts, I think really helped my career as well.
awesome. Yeah, let's dive into the first part to the yeah application lifecycle management. For listeners who may not maybe new with the concept, what exactly is ARM and why does it matter?
Yeah, so for me, I see it as a way of professionalizing the delivery of software, right? So just taking it back to one of my early mentors in my career. When I was younger, as I said, I was just passionate about writing code all day long, and I used to question the principles of why do we need to do source control and automated builds and deployments and unit testing. But one of the things that my mentor said to me still stays with me today. He says you can build the best software in the world. If you can't reliably deliver it to your end users, then that software is actually useless.
Mm,
So that was a light bulb moment for me where I understood the real value of these concepts and these principles. You basically want to apply and engineer some ways of doing the delivery of that software, which basically brings with it quality and consistency and reliability. And all of those principles mean you have to do things like implement source control and basically make sure that you get visibility of what's changing every time you make a change and why it's changing. And you have the ability to do things like rollback. You then have also the ability to make sure you can safely transport the code that you're building across environments to provide a nice, clean place, which is representative of your production environment, but isolated away and a safe space to kind of quality assure what you're building before you deploy into production. And applying that separation between environments is something that's key. So yeah, overall, I basically see it as a way of building a process which is consistent, repeatable, reliable, and gives you ultimate visibility and quality assurance, taking your software from the dev environment all the way into production. And that may mean a number of different environments in between the two as well.
I think we have a lot of business stakeholders actually, also in IT projects, and I think we have a lot of words like environment, solutions, source control, deployment pipelines, and I think they never heard this. How did you explain it to the to business stakeholders that you don't? I see IT speech.
Yeah, it's a great question. Understanding these concepts is critical, and you have to basically, you're absolutely right. You have to basically take the business with you on that journey as you implement and engineer those processes, right? And that's the only way you're going to get buy-in from the business. So it's critical to understand these concepts. So I would say an environment is a way to isolate your code, your data, and the code could be your applications, your automations, your reports, your agents, any kind of assets that you build is part of your overall solution that you're building. So isolating those between different stages of the delivery, if you like. So your dev environment, I would say, is the analogy I like to give is like it's a garage where the bits of the car is in pieces, the engine is in complete different components, the bonnet is up, and the interior is totally ripped out. So that sort of car is not safe for the road. You can't really drive it, and it's okay. It's expected for things to be up and down in that dev environment, to be unstable, for errors to be there, because it's not designed to be a functional production environment. This is where your dev team is innovating, is researching, is playing around with different concepts and trying out new ideas, and ultimately trying to build a solution that is useful for the business. So that would be your dev environment. And once they go through this process and they iterate over the project, and sometimes you will get to points in time where you feel like, okay, this could be potentially a viable product for the business that they could use. At that point, you would export and package up that piece of code, and you want to take it away and put it into a different environment, which could be a test environment. Again, it's not your production environment, but it's production like. But it provides a safe way to quality assure and test that code and make sure it's suitable for the business use. It meets all the requirements. It meets all the standards in terms of performance. It meets all the standards in terms of data and quality and all the rest of it. So that would be a test environment, and then production is where you are basically actually the business is actually using the software that's been built for day-to-day operations, whatever that might happen to be. So that's how I would describe environments. Solutions are, I would say, a way of packaging your code base. I'm gonna keep referring it to code, even though you may not be writing code, you may be building low code solutions, but under the hood somewhere, it's still code beneath all the layers of abstraction. It's still XML, it's still JSON, it's still YAML, etc. So solutions is a framework to package up those customizations, that code base out from the dev environment, and basically transport it across to the test and production environments. Now, the people often overly simplify the concept of a solution as being a container to do that transportation. But if you look at the solution framework as a whole, it provides a lot more than that, just that transportation capability. because it manages things like dependencies. It manages things like how your code base is going to interact with other code bases that may be in the target environment at runtime. So we have concepts like solution layering and dependencies between objects. All of that is governed by the solution framework. Even the updates that Microsoft ship through the platform are ultimately delivered into your environments using the solution framework under the hood, right? So it's important to understand the solution framework as a whole, and not just the concept of a container, which is the solution which people sometimes oversimplify. So there are other concepts around that, like for example, managed properties and publishers, which really help to bring that whole concept together as well. So it is quite a deep topic, and I've spent a number of years kind of understanding and structuring solutions the best way for customers, and helping them and their delivery teams understand these concepts as well, so they can make best use of the tooling available and deliver the products in a reliable way.
Yeah. And at what point should an organization start thinking about ARM, and it's day one and or later? And especially, I think a lot of companies make this transformation to citizen development companies.
Yo,
So what would you say? When should the organization think about it?
yeah, so my experience is more biased towards enterprise grade projects. So that's the larger solutions where there's perhaps thousands of users impacted and real business critical solutions that are being built. So for those kinds of projects, ALM is absolutely non-negotiable. You can't you can't reliably build and deliver those kinds of solutions from that level of software complexity
Mm,
when there's huge business impact without ALM at all. So for those sorts of projects, I would recommend, you have to have some sort of ALM strategy way before you even start building it. Now, the solution framework is unique in that it unifies the whole development and the build and deployment process. So sometimes people refer to these things as the inner loop and the outer loop, but the solution framework basically unifies all of those things. So there are implications across all those stages of that DevOps process when you think about the solution framework. So
mm,
it basically means that for enterprise projects, I recommend you don't even start development until you've got a robust ALM strategy in place. Now, for smaller and medium projects, there might be there might be uh, there might be some requirement to basically start to demonstrate value uh, and not invest in an ALM strategy upfront. And that's okay. Sometimes in order for stakeholders to get buy-in into the technology and the platform, they want to see the kind of real business value that we are proposing in building those solutions. So fortunately, the platform allows you to build without having these ALM concepts in place from day one. But
mm,
as the solution matures and it kind of grows in size and complexity, you really want to start to think about an ALM strategy. Now, the great thing about the platform is that there are different flavors of ALM available to us, and you can implement those things in different ways. I think the key secret is basically to engineer an ALM process that works for the business, that works for the delivery teams as well. So
mm,
there's perhaps no need to over engineer or over complicate it. If, for example, the team is primarily comprised of low code engineers or makers,
mm,
and they are not likely to build code first components. In those scenarios, you don't want to make your ALM process too complex because you don't want to alienate those team members. But at the other end of the spectrum, where you're going to have all of these complex objects, you've got the full power of things like Azure DevOps and GitHub, as an example, and the
mm.
tooling nicely integrates with that. Microsoft gives us extensions for Azure DevOps and actions for for GitHub actions we can use as well. So you've got complete control and flexibility across that spectrum of depending on the nature of the project.
Will you say Power Platform is ready for real enterprise development? And how does the Power Platform and strategy look like today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to remember that, the Power Platform hasn't come about in the recent years. It's evolved over a long time. So the background I came from in Dynamics CRM, that's the what has become the core and the fundamental building blocks on where Power Platform is today. Things like Dataverse and modern driven apps have come
Mm,
from those all those years. So over the years, it has matured quite heavily. And as I say, the solution framework is the backbone of how to implement ALM in the Power Platform. But these days, as I say, there are so many different options available. You can use things like Power Platform pipelines for, if you've got simpler projects where you've got a primarily community of citizen developers and makers. A native Git integration is also something that has become available over the recent years. So you can do things like source control integration and set it up very quickly. And
mm.
then at the other end of the spectrum, as I say, you've got complete control and flexibility to engineer the processes as in how you want, right? And there's the full spectrum of pro code. So you can do things like full stack development as well using React front end development, and you can integrate with enterprise grade solutions in Azure as well through Azure Service Bus or functions, etc. And there's a rich plethora of connectors in the Power Platform as well, and those numbers goes into thousands. So you've got the ability to integrate with your other applications or services, and that connectivity is enabled through low code, and you can even do it through pro code if you wanted. So yeah, absolutely, I would say the Power Platform is definitely something that makes enterprise software delivery possible. Definitely.
And let us a little bit, have a view at the CI/CD development and Power Platform over the last years. What will you say? How have this changed?
Sorry, Miko, you have to repeat that.
Uh,
You broke up
uh,
slightly.
yeah, how has CI/CD evolved over the Power Platform over the last years?
I still could have made that
Uh,
out. Sorry.
no,
Try that again.
wait. I hope it's better now. Better? Uh, did you hear me? Uh, how
No.
has CI/CD evolved over Power Platform over the last few years?
Okay, I think the connection's back now. Could you repeat that one last time? Sorry.
Yeah. How has CI/CD evolved the over the last years, especially in the view of Power Platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, when the solution framework first came about and the associated tooling first came about with the solution package and package deployer, the barrier to entry in implementing ALM was quite high. You still had to know the principles of Azure DevOps, and that was the primary vehicle for implementing ALM. And you still had to understand things like Git and all of those kinds of principles. And you needed an experienced DevOps engineering skills in the team to be able to implement those processes. But over the recent years, things like Power Platform pipelines and the native Git integration feature has really come out and lowered the barrier to entry for implementing ALM. So for simpler projects, you can basically spin up Power Platform pipelines in a matter of minutes. You can connect up to a Git repository in Azure DevOps in a matter of minutes. So it's really made those things possible. But I would say there are still limitations if the project that you're delivering is enterprise grade, is complex, is affecting thousands of users, then you may find that you run into limitations quite quickly with those options of our platform pipelines and the native Git integration feature. So you might want to consider the other end of the spectrum, like Azure DevOps and GitHub. And those things, again, are getting better and better all the time. And under the hood, underneath all of this is effectively the CLI, the Power Platform CLI, which Microsoft have brought out in recent years, and even that is getting better and better every month with new capabilities and new features coming out. So yeah, it's an interesting place to be, and it's pretty much what I've built my career around for a long time now.
Uh, I love Azure DevOps. It's such cool. I love it. But actually, I think all companies say we need GitHub Actions. Can you say when I say versus Azure DevOps versus GitHub Action? How should the organization choose between them?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So before about 4 or 5 years ago, my experience was exclusively in Azure DevOps. That is the known tool that is became almost the standard for most people working in this particular space. And that was almost like the default choice for most teams because that's what they knew, right? And the features in Azure DevOps around work items and boards and having that entire platform um, totally dedicated to delivering DevOps across, CI/CD and integration with work item management, package management, test management, all of those capabilities made Azure DevOps a really compelling option. But about 4 years ago, when I started working with one of the top universities in the UK, they'd already made the decision that their CI/CD tool of choice was going to be GitHub. So essentially, that forced me to learn how to implement ALM for Power Platform using GitHub. Prior to that, I had no experience of it, and I found the two worlds to be very different. Primarily because there's no work item management, or the work item management within GitHub is quite limited. So for work item management, this client was using Jira. So there's connectivity possible between Jira and GitHub. You could still do the integration and plug those gaps somewhat. And now these days, as agentic engineering is coming in, and they're saying that the agentic DevOps features, a lot of them are going to be exclusive to GitHub. So, for example, GitHub Copilot running in the browser in GitHub.com and getting it to kind of participate in that DevOps process, for example, in code reviews. That's not a capability that's available in Azure DevOps today. So, for that reason, I think GitHub is becoming more and more an option that, at least an option that organizations should be considering now, especially if they want to take advantage of these DevOps engineering processes. Yeah.
Mm, mm. And can you walk us through a ideal, I say, development to product a production workflow? How do you handle this?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it, because we customers are still most customers are still in the space in Power Platform of doing customization within an environment, right? Even though things are changing now, but most customers are still in that kind of mindset of doing code and customization within an environment, testing it there before they promote to downstream, and that's okay. So the way I engineer the processes is, you need to think about the skills of the team. If your team is primarily composed of low code, no code developers, you might say, okay, you don't want to burden those team members with the complexity of working with Git and merging the code base, etc. So for that scenario, you may decide that you want to simplify the process and abstract away a lot of that complexity to the point that you ask your team members to basically work inside a shared development environment in a shared solution. And then once they're ready to promote the code base, they would invoke an Azure DevOps pipeline if they're using Azure DevOps, or a GitHub Actions workflow if they're using GitHub. And that process would basically automate fully the process of exporting all of the customization from the source dev environment, unpacking and extracting it all, doing things like quality gates and control over that, incrementing version numbers, etc., and then still committing that to a repository, Git repository. And then you would then trigger a CI process, a continuous integration process, which would be implemented as another Azure DevOps build pipeline or a GitHub Action workflow, which would do the opposite of that. So it would basically compile deployable build artifacts from the source control files. So in the case of Dataverse Solutions, that means basically packing up those impact solution files and producing managed solutions to then deploy to the downstream environments. And then at the other end of that build pipeline, you would basically consume those artifacts and have another pipeline or a GitHub Action workflow to deploy those artifacts to the downstream environments. And those pipelines or workflows would have steps in them to basically interact with the source and the target environments. So it would do things like exporting the solutions and importing them into the target environment. And
Cool.
that's basically a simplified view of how you can engineer I would say a maker-friendly ALM process. You can make it more complex. As I say, the tooling and the platform is flexible enough to make it as simple or as complex as you like. So you could, for example, do things like give each team member their own dedicated dev environment and then get them to invoke a process to commit their changes to a feature branch and then do things like get them to create from that feature branch to the main or the master branch, whichever is the source branch to deploy from. Another example of how
Mm,
you can make it slightly more advanced.
yeah. And what will you say how yeah or what role do source control play, especially in this low code, no code area?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially when you think of where coding agents are coming into the world of Power Platform development now. I don't know if you've seen the GitHub Copilot plugins and skills that you can use to fully automate the development of certain parts of your solutions. But coding agents obviously don't work with UIs. They don't work with point and click interfaces, right? They work with the text, the code. So for that reason, source control will become a more and more important. Although for me, it was important way before coding agents came out because primarily because I like to have the visibility of what's changing. Line by line, I like to see exactly what component is changing, how it's changing, what properties are changing on it, and also the integration. So when I make those into source control, even from an unpacked solution, you want to see what files are changed, when they change, why they changed, and linking those back to the work items so you've got complete end-to-end traceability, visibility. And it's really important you need to do things like rollback as well, right? So if, for example, there is some regression, something has changed and caused some functionality to break, if you have source control history, you can do things like, for example, redeploy an older build in order to quickly recover and make sure there's no impact on or minimize the adverse impact on data, as an example, in the production environment. So source control for that reason really brings a lot of value, a lot of benefit to my perspective.
You have also a lot of experience built with enterprise company. Where see you the typical challenges when enterprise companies implementing CI/CD for Power Platform?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is in the mindset in getting people to understand the real value of these things because traditionally, remember, ALM and CI/CD, source control, automated builds and deployments are seen as complex things and align those principles with what Microsoft have been uh, for a long time as a local no code platform, which really lowers the barrier to entry to software development for non-technical people. Those two things initially seem as though they are conflicting with each other. So my role as an ALM engineer for Power Platform becomes more business focused. So I tend to focus on the education factor of it and getting teams to understand why this is important and how they can basically engineer processes that don't seem overly daunting or complex, even for local no code. So with you in them understand, and then basically you're building something that is impacting their ways of working and their development process as well. So for that reason, also it's important to bring them on that journey and get them to understand that holistic process and why it's important.
Mm,
I think that's usually for me the biggest challenge, to try and bring those worlds together, low code, no code kind of concept, as well as the more pro code side of it, and the development, the influence of ALM processes in memory.
mm. And when, yeah, without exposing any company, but can you share a success story where implementing proper ALM significantly improved project outcomes?
Yeah. So the most recent example, this one of the top 10 university I was working with for the last 2 years. Before I went in, they were basically doing manual deployments across a number of different environments. Somebody had to take responsibility of that. Decided they want to take a build from the dev environment and deploy it into a target environment. Somebody would have to, out of hours, do the whole packaging up, so exporting out of the dev environment manually through the UI, storing it somewhere in a shared folder or in SharePoint, for example, so that at least they have some sort of a visibility of what things are, and not necessarily what's being promoted, because they were still storing zip files. And at least they could have some sort of version control there, and then they were doing that manually. But yeah, I was brought in primarily to professionalize that ALM process. So
Mm,
I implemented this source control centric, maker friendly ALM process for them using GitHub Actions. So that meant the team was, even though they weren't that experienced with things like Git and branching and CI/CD, they were able to basically go into the GitHub in the browser and push buttons to still invoke what produces then a professional ALM process. And that meant all of those manual processes has disappeared. And I implemented this not just for database solutions, but also for things like configuration data. They apply the same process for that. So, for example, they also had Power Pages sites as well. They have a similar process for that. And when they were consuming third-party or ISV products, I was also responsible for engineering a deployment process to help them consume those products and implement those as well. So that would be an
mm.
example of where it really brought value to them.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think a little bit one topic, or I think it's also important. It's the governance part. And yeah, I say Microsoft has in the last years, they, yeah, a lot of, I don't know, marketing for citizen developers. So I will say it's was or is a major focus for Microsoft. But how do we balance governance and innovation?
Yeah, in terms of, uh, I would say a big part of it is obviously managing environments, right? And having those environments, provisioning them, and maintaining good access control policies to those environments, and making sure that you work on the principle of least privilege. Make sure that only the people who necessarily need to get into an environment have the level of access they need. So setting up the ideal guardrails around protecting the applications and data is a big part of the DevOps process. And if you because the Dataverse security model is so rich in terms of its capabilities and its deep integration with things like Entra ID, and you put them to protect with things like Entra ID groups and things like that. Um, yeah, it's definitely something you don't want to ignore, and it should be a big part of the wider ALM and governance strategy as well. The key policies for making sure that you've got no data leaking out of your environment um, where it doesn't need to go, and make sure all of the things of that nature are protected.
Mm, awesome. Um, but is there some, I say, governance practice you say every organization should have in place?
I would say, yeah, having some sort of governance in place is really important, right? So because it comes back to the concept of environments and making sure you've got only the right data and the right code base in an environment, right? And you've got the necessary guardrails in place to protect access to that environment appropriately, and working on the principle of least privileges. Now, the for a long time, the gold standard for governance was the Power Platform Center. It's deprecated, and Microsoft are shifting a lot of those capabilities into the core admin center, and the APIs that will become available. And they're getting the existing APIs for the admin center are also getting better and better. So it's that these capabilities and features are becoming part of the core platform. So it means that organizations don't need to rely on a separate solution or a separate product like the COE starter kit that was around for a number of years to really implement those kinds of services. Well, yeah, this is an evolving space, and Microsoft are investing quite a lot into this particular area. So it's one to keep on top of, definitely.
Mm, I think last years a lot of companies talk about SharePoint sprawl, but actually I think there's also a Power Platform solution sprawl. I think I see companies they have thousands of Power Platform solutions. So what advice would you give to these organizations to manage all this?
As environment, it's important to have visibility of when Power Platform are more becoming a sole point to administer and manage all of those capabilities. So the invest one area, metro area, to give you full visibility of what's going on, so you can see things like, how do we have across all of our environments, and what's going on in terms of movement of those things between environments, and execution of the APIs, etc. as well. So yeah, that kind of those kind of metrics and visibility is getting better and better in the admin center. But yeah,
Mm,
as I say, it's definitely something that customers should keep a close eye on. And yeah, I think it's probably all I'd say for that.
Awesome. And I think so a little bit or what you have this deep expert so knowledge. So what emerging trends are you seeing around enterprise platform adoption?
Yeah, I think the big one is AI, right? And how coding agents are changing the landscape of how we do um, development in the Power Platform, how we build and deploy our solutions. So, to give you an example, I I've basically been using quite a lot of GitHub Copilot to write the code for me now.
Mm,
And I don't write the code directly. This is not just in the space of Power Platform, but also development outside, software development outside of Power Platform as well. And it's interesting to see where agentic engineering is becoming part of the Power Platform delivery as well. So as I mentioned earlier, as Microsoft are releasing skills for Claude Code and GitHub Copilot and other coding agents, it's making it's making things like uh, parts of Power Platform solution development more and more possible using coding agents. So this is a trend that I think will get
mm,
better and better, and I think it will start to gradually become more prevalent across the Power Platform development landscape. So it will become more and more possible, I think, to do things like what we have been doing using point and click customization, like Power Automate Cloudflow, building UI components, and all these kind of things as well. So it's already there for some aspects, but I think it will become more and more prevalent across other areas of the platform.
And yeah, will or can AI in the future handle the ALM completely, or did you think that that's not possible?
I don't think it will become autonomous just yet. I think the immediate future is really a human in the loop, right? And making sure that as engineers we still have some sort of oversight of the design architects, but we need to make sure that those guardrails are in place to make sure that solutions are still being developed in terms of adherence to standards, adherence to good design principles and practices. And I think our role as engineers will change, and we will shift focuses to basically learn to write better prompts to implement those sorts of guardrails, I think. But in terms of what will happen, maybe 6, 7, 8 years down the line, who knows? We'll have to wait and see for that.
And what advice can you give, as a Power Platform juniors when they start, yeah, or will become Power Platform professionals? What skills should they focus over the next years?
So the tables have really turned, right? For a long time, the focus was on how low code, no code really lowered the barrier to entry for people working in the Power Platform, and the value was really around how quickly you can build solutions without writing code, and people didn't necessarily need to learn code. But what's happened in the last couple of years, with especially with coding agents now, is that because these tools primarily work with code, it's become possible to still deliver software quickly, but the focus is not so much on doing that using point and click customization, but being able to write good natural language prompts to build those solutions. So I would say the advice I would give is not to fear the new tooling. Jump in, dive in, get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid of breaking things, try things out, experiment, learn, and grow with the platform and the tools. And because a lot of us fear that is AI going to take our jobs, and it's doing at such a pace, it's hard for us to keep on top of. Don't let that be a deterrent to you for learning. Whatever small thing you can learn and experiment and play with, grab it with both hands, treat it as an opportunity, and keep experimenting and keep learning and keep sharing that knowledge as well. So the community is a big part of that as well. So I would encourage people to get involved and get into discussions, attend your local user groups and conferences, talk to people about all of these changes in the technology landscape, and just get to know what other people are doing as well. Share your own ideas, and collaboratively, we can basically become better engineers and continue to bring value to our customers.
Okay, this is awesome. So let us jump into the quick fire round. So I ask some questions and you answer what come in your mind. So uh,
Sure.
Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions?
GitHub Actions,
Okay. Canvas apps or model-driven apps?
model driven.
Okay. What should everyone eat when he comes to Lancaster?
Sorry, say that again.
What should people eat when they come to Leicester, to your hometown?
Oh, what should they eat? Great question. Anything unhealthy.
Awesome. This is good. The most underrated Power Platform feature.
The most underrated Power Platform feature. Dataverse.
Okay. Most overused Power Platform feature?
Power Automate.
What's your favorite productivity tool?
At the moment, GitHub Copilot.
Okay. When you get the chance to say Microsoft one feature they should add it tomorrow, what would it be?
Well, I would say giving us the ability to manage Power Platform connections programmatically. That's a feature that's been missing for a long time.
Yeah. And coffee or tea or energy drink during development? Book, podcast, or resource you recommended?
Sorry, repeat that again.
A book or podcast or other resource you recommended?
Um, Generally, I would say just connect with people and consume all of their resources, right? Whether that's blog or podcasts or their GitHub repositories as well. There's too many to name, I'm afraid.
What is the thing when you travel 20 years back and you meet your younger yourself? What will he yeah, I say think uh you never believe what 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 can you tell him about you?
Yeah, I
Would
would say keep an open mind, experiment, don't get fixated on one thing, and explore as many different options as possible.
Parvez, thank you for joining us today and yeah, sharing your insights on the Power Platform ALM and enterprise delivery practice. Yeah, for our listeners, I can say they found all the links in the show notes from you and can how they can connect. Yeah, and I hope you enjoy the show. And the last words to the audience is to you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Mikos. I really enjoyed the discussion. If for any listeners, if they want to connect, by all means, please do so. LinkedIn is normally where I share most of my insights and knowledge. So follow me on LinkedIn, connect, and ask me any questions. Very happy to help. Thank you again once.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Cheers. Bye.